Janice, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. For a moment there, I didn't have any audio.
Yeah, we'll get started in a couple of minutes here, folks. Hang in there.
You're going to be narrating today, Janice, instead of Terry?
Yes, Terry is happily hiking somewhere with her family. So,
Right, yes, I understand. Carl, you look attractive with those white glasses.
well, I think it's 7:01 here in Eastern time, so maybe it's a good time to get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Janice Bobby, filling in for Terry this week. We'll get started in just a moment, but before we do, tonight we're doing something a little bit different. We'll be live streaming this session on EDA's YouTube and Facebook channels. So just a reminder, if you don't agree to having your image appearing on this recording, turn off your camera now. And now is probably a good time, if you wouldn't mind, to please mute yourself. So the link to the YouTube and the Facebook is in the chat. I think I don't know whether it is yet, but it will be at some point. And again, this is something new, so bear with us if it doesn't go as smoothly as we'd like. That link for the YouTube and the Facebook chat is something that you can share with your friends and family. They can just go to those two sites and see exactly what you're seeing here on Zoom. Now, if these links will be the same also for the next 3 sessions that will be ending on July the 5th. So if you want to see a recording of tonight's session, we'll include those links in the reminder notice that you usually receive the day before next week's session. So you can look for those links in there. And I believe there's one extra one that we will put in because there was only 3 in the last newsletter. Okay, so with that, let's get started. And I'll just give a second here for James to start the recording. So, okay, thank you and welcome everyone to session 5 of Principles of Local Economic Democracy. And this session is called Managing Complexity. The video that's coming up will provide a brief review of what we've covered so far. But before we begin, let's refresh your memory on what we've covered in the last 4 sessions. In the first 2 weeks, we examined the dichotomy of use value and exchange value. Use value is our practical appreciation of goods. Exchange value is the price that these goods are worth in the marketplace. We examined how the differences between these 2 value systems had led to the clash between the interests of freedom and the interests of equality in society. We also showed how these differences have led to social inequality. Now, in the 3rd week, we discussed how we can resolve the paradox by cooperating in the distribution of goods to people based on their needs. And last week, we examined why culture is needed in supporting social cooperation for the distribution of resources. So this week we'll cover the role of education and technology in supporting this culture of cooperation. So let's begin by looking at the video now.
Welcome to Session 5, Managing Complexity. In the last session, we discussed how cooperation can lead to cultural balance in our communities. This would enable the economic principles of use value and exchange value to transform individual self-interest into collective interest. We also recognize that cooperation is necessary to ensure that resources are distributed to meet the needs of everyone. Culture is necessary to support the social identity that we share when we distribute value in our community. This means measuring people's needs in order to allocate resources to meet those needs. So, what are the key elements in building this more peaceful and self-sufficient culture? Education is first. By educating ourselves in many different disciplines, such as arts, science, mathematics, medicine, history, anthropology, and geography, to name a few, we come to better understand how our species has evolved so that we can adapt and grow as persons. Critical thinking engages our deeply held interests and empowers us to pursue a career, improve our quality of life, and have a positive impact on society. Education also offers insight and understanding about different cultures, which ultimately helps us to become tolerant in our interactions with others. It is through this sharing of knowledge that civilizations evolve. Education helps us to create and mold the kind of culture we want to live in, sparking creativity, promoting collaboration, generating communication, and teaching us to think in sequential ways to organize and support today's growing populations. We must understand how to sustain our advanced ways of life rather than take them for granted. For example, we need to learn why use value and exchange value emphasize private ownership over public ownership of Earth's diminishing resources. We need educators to help us distinguish the various commodities which are logically and rightfully public, such as equal access to food, water, and energy, from those that belong in private hands.
So we've just stopped the video here because we thought we'd like to ask a few questions. So having looked at that, why do you think that we must understand the relationship between use value and exchange value before we can resolve the rest of the problems in society? Anyone have any thoughts on that? And I can't, whoops. I can't quite see some of that, if there's anybody with their hand up, but let me read that again because I sort of have it on two screens here and it's jumping around. Why do you think that we must understand the relationship between use value and exchange value before we can solve the rest of problems in society? Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, just wanted to jump in, hopefully stimulate, more conversation. What did it for me was seeing the very basic definition of use value and market or exchange value as need versus want. And just came up with an example recently. Internet, certainly, internet access, high-speed internet, it has always been like a luxury. It's always been something that's, been cool. We need it for work, all that kind of stuff. But I think that luxury is being transformed into a need, expressing that without high-speed internet, we lack education. Children are lacking a major component in school. And all of a sudden, that need, that basic value, not exchange value, but not exchange, but the need value becomes, the internet becomes a need, not a want, but a need. I've been working with Verizon, and they came up with this program where they are giving away 5G internet boxes and providing that internet for low-income families. So that says to me that that's an example of an exchange value being turned into a need value. Don't know if that makes sense. I hope so.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Claire, go ahead, please. I think
I have a little bit of a problem with that because there's plenty of things that people need that have been privatized. And by privatized, I mean become a commodity, commodified. And it says right there, commodities which are rightfully public, blah, 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 blah. So to me, it's got to be, anything that can be put in under our current system, anything can be put on the market, including our thought processes. And so the fact that things are commodified doesn't mean that they doesn't overtake the value of use value. That's the problem with the system.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Any other points on that, Brad?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think that for me, the distinction between use value and what's the other one? Use value and exchange value is just kind of highlighting how much we've overemphasized exchange value in our system, and highlighting the distinction.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Good. Okay, thanks. So here's
James
another
has
question.
his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I can't see that. Who's that?
James.
James. Oh, okay. James, go ahead.
Yeah, Janice, I can't put up my electronic hand because my screen is completely blocked, and so I don't have access to that. So
Well, just jump in.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. What it means is the personal value of practicality of the things that we have around the house, and is something that is a lot different than their value in the marketplace, right? If you take something that you have and you try to sell it on the secondary market, you realize that, oh gosh, it's worth a lot less than what I paid for it now. On the other hand, a lot of things are, overvalued in the marketplace. And so what the point is along the lines of what Brad was saying, really, we've taken simple things and made them very expensive. And a lot of people are benefiting from that. And so what has happened is it's created enormous imbalance in society. So Janice's original question was, how does that, why does that have to be resolved first? And I would say that it's that distinction between use value and exchange value that is at the core of our economic system. Even though you never hear those terms expressed in the economic reports or in the newspapers or whatever you're reading, nobody talks like that. And that's because we've all come down to the meaning of value as what's it worth? Is it, you mentioned something in nature and said, oh, well, I bet somebody could estimate what the economic cost of buying that would be. And people do that all the time. But that's the point. We've commodified everything. And a lot of the stuff that we're commodifying really would do better if it wasn't commodified, because it lends itself to not only inflation, but people can make excess profits out of, food, water, and energy, for example. And so those questions have never been resolved. So it won't do us any good to establish a more cooperative society and to build our culture and even to, have education and technology to support society unless we really address those two basic things, that use value, which is a personal value, has been transformed into a market value.
Right. Thank you, James. Yeah, commoditizing water is something that drives me crazy with bottled water. I try never to buy bottled water. Anyway, here's another question for everyone. What role does education play in supporting a culture of cooperation? What role does education play in supporting a culture of cooperation? Greg, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I don't have my usual microphone tonight, but
Yep, I can hear you.
I'm kind of taking this from the back end, the inverse, looking at where we're at today, especially in this country, as education and all the different ethical and social aspects of education in schools over the last couple of generations have kind of been pulling back, and people getting less of it. You can see, I think that's a kind of a real strong effect on how we behave in groups and individually in our society. We're just seeing that today with, people don't understand. A lot of people are thinking more towards anarchical, individual freedom, anarchical approaches, because they just don't understand how important it is for us to have cohesion and cooperation. And we're not educated about it anymore.
Right. Jeff, go ahead, please.
In our society, in our culture, isn't education everything? Isn't education the means by somebody, regardless of the socioeconomic conditions they're brought into this world, can really climb to the highest based on education, and education being the spark of critical thinking. Critical thinking is such an important element. And haven't we tried with business also to equalize that, to make an even playing field? I use the example of high-speed internet. That's available to everybody right now. Well, not really, because there are certain locations that are just so in the boonies, they just don't have, but pretty much everybody can have high-speed internet. With high-speed internet, they can receive a lot of educational value. Wikipedia, the knowledge access we have, haven't we really try to create an even playing field? Not everybody's going to go to Harvard. Not everybody's going to be Ivy League, but you could start a community college and you could really do incredibly well in our country with a state college degree. If we've got the initiative, the support, and all of that, haven't we really created that nice even playing field in a way in the area of education? If that individual and family is so yearning for it. And I think wonderful examples of education for kids can be seen in the African American community, where long time ago, the African American knew that education was the tool, the step ladder up. and developed an amazing education institutional system right within the African American community. Those are some great colleges, but there's no saying that folks have to stay in that system. Affirmative action has helped a lot in a lot of that. And maybe we don't have all the answers, but haven't we come a long way in leveling the playing field on that? Hope that wasn't too long on that one.
Thank you, Jeff. Being a communications person, I always think the role that education plays in culture is, I always think of public service announcements. I don't think we have enough of those because everybody watches TV usually or listens to some form of radio. And that's a perfect place to sort of spread messages and information that we want to talk about, things like equality and sustainability and that kind of thing. Any other questions on that particular, any other answers, I should say, on that question? And okay, I have one more.
Brad has his hand up.
Thank you. I can't see that. So go ahead.
Yeah, I
Go ahead,
figured
Brad.
you didn't see it, so I used my real hand. So I want to highlight the other side, not disagreeing fundamentally, but highlight the other side of what I can't see his name right now, the gentleman was just saying. My experience and observation with the educational system and the media, which as a means of quote unquote education, is that especially the educational system, which kind of goes to the question, doesn't really, and maybe we've talked about that here, doesn't really support or foster cooperation. It fosters competition, individual grades, get ahead, and it also, there's the most of the media, the internet has been taken over to a great degree by different interests. So it's also not, it's not fostering a broader view of possibilities, but more the beliefs or the interests of the powers that be. Enough for now.
Yeah, no, good, totally good point. Since we're on the topic of education, how do you think that education may be failing society? We've talked about how good it is, but what happens if you think it's failing society? Any comments on that? Jacqueline, please go ahead.
Just the thing that Brad was just talking about, the fact that education does seem to focus on, at best, the equality aspect, pardon me, as Jeff was saying, increasingly equal access to education and that sort of thing. But I think where it's really failed us is in terms of cooperation. And that seems to be something that really needs to be looked at and hopefully turned around. That is, that we have to really work together for the good, if we want to see the good of everybody sort of taken care of, whether it's basic needs, water, food, energy, or access to good jobs, when we get out of school. Instead of just focusing on the individual and their benefits and their salary and their job opportunities. So I think that's where education is failing us.
Yeah, it's a real culture shift. Ed, go ahead, please. Thank you, Jacqueline.
I agree with the dissenters, really. I mean, I'm really aware of the failures of the education system. And it's really not, it's hard to say failures of the education system with a straight face because it's governmental, it's social, it's I mean, how can you have a good education system without funding, without somebody saying, this is what it means to be educated? Is that educated by looking on the internet, for hours and hours and hours at a time and going to all of these conspiracies theorists websites and just immersing yourself in this kind of really intense negativity? Is that our education now? And I think it is. But it's particularly difficult to speak of it because my sister is one of those people. And it's just extremely saddening to know that and attempt to just let her know that someone really loves her. It's the society that I'm in is really a society that doesn't want to fund the kind of education that gives them options. I was thrilled to speak to a man who was actually working with school children in this area and taking them on field trips to the Middle East, to Middle Eastern countries. And I thought, that's fantastic. That's wonderful that he can do this. And we talked about broadening, people's understandings and views of different cultures. But that's really not happening in our schools. And I don't see that really happening. I think I'll just leave it there because I'm just, I'm kind of aware of this opposite side of, quote, education. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's kind of scary when you think people are getting a lot of their education material on the internet because you can't believe everything you see there either. Okay, Jeff, you had a comment.
I'll try to, make it quick. Yeah, Brad, it's pronounced Jeffrey, and believe me, I had nothing to do with it. Going more on what Ed just said, the education opportunity is just so plentiful right now. Issues are flawed facts. People taking as gospel things that are ridiculous, flawed, not thoroughly researched. Our educational system, my daughter Sarah had a parent-teacher conference. A lot's going on in the Howell School District in New Jersey. And Sarah's comment to the teacher was, look, I'm dropping Ben off. He's a boy. I just expect when I pick him up, he's going to be a boy. Let those conversations happen in my home. That's something that's happening in the schools right now. And there's a lot of thought that is appropriate education, political correctness, inclusion. I tell my daughter, before she presents an argument, she's really got to do the research, the real research, the research like we used to do, not the quick education by influencers or people that have interests in certain areas, but the real factual research. That's where our education system, may be flawed and not serving us our best right now. Too much information, too much flawed facts, and not enough of the real nitty-gritty hard research.
Okay, thank you. Carl, you had your hand up too.
Thank you. In my mind, I think it's a great conversation that I don't want to overly reiterate. I think it's important to note the distinction between our current Western education system and education as a whole, right? And I think what I'm hearing is that our education system is failing. There's the true lack of maintaining independent critical thinking, scientific driven or research driven methods to prove constructs and concepts. And there is a supersaturation of access to information, which without fact checking, right, that allows people to regurgitate rather than form opinions based on critical theory, right? And so in my mind, there is a systemic lack of trust or systematic lack of trust around our current educational system and the way it's been politicized in America. But I don't think education is failing, right? I think you actually find people who are self-educated at times who are fascinating in the way that they approach society and the innovations that they have the capacity to undertake. And that is something that we have to really consider, right? So access to knowledge is available, but it requires skill and guidance to actually truly access the right level of knowledge to sift, like my granddad used to say, sift through and eat the meat and throw away the bone, right? And sift through and find what's really pertinent for what we're doing in society. And we're quick to look for the political charge space to stand on rather than utilizing hypothesis-driven methods or anything else that really helps us prove that something is real or to test it in society. And so our intellectual curiosity is at question, right? If we live in a world where the access through Wikipedia, what used to be encyclopedias, now Wikipedia, to one day ChatGPT, which is only as good as the information that's put into it, will be able to provide to us. And so we have to really catch ourselves and be willing to encourage the sustainability of proven methods for learning and education that are going to be necessary to ascertain truth. And I think that's part of what economic democracy advocates is really focused on is once we get through sifting through a whole bunch of things, how do we actually have these research proven methods, or can we introduce new methods, right? Like carrying capacity in a way that's meaningful to help us make decisions around sustainability of life and drive towards legislation to bring that to pass.
Very good. Thank you, Carl. If no one has any other comments, let's move on to the next section. Oh, Ed, you have a comment or yours? Oh, no, you're saying let's move on, maybe. So the next section we're going to cover is technology. So let's roll the video and find out what's coming up next.
Technology is next. Computers and tablets are needed not only for the pursuit of knowledge in the classroom. Technology is also a crucial step in creating complexity in society to ensure that our growing populations are self-sufficient and secure. Technology contributes to the self-governance that is necessary for advanced societies to function comfortably while meeting the basic needs of their people. However, our sophisticated transportation, agricultural, and communication technologies are still serving the use value of consumption and the exchange value of wealth accumulation. Rather than regenerate resources and put an end to inequality, technology's operating myth is that the individual always needs more consumption and wealth, and there is little need to care for one another. As in the field of education, modern technology has been captured by the corporate narrative, which says that the pursuit of economic growth is our ultimate reality. For example, companies like Facebook, Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Uber claim to personalize our experiences in meeting social and material objectives. Yet their main outcome is to profit from fragmenting us into niche markets and belief systems for the purpose of shaping our behavior. Even our public media, which is increasingly run by large conglomerates, has shifted away from informing people in the public interest. Instead, they're training us to believe and consume what businesses want. As a consequence, corporate-driven news, education, and technology are disconnecting people from one another and from the earth. Rather than help us to survive and thrive, these institutions are managing what is already of value and not regenerating anything new or vital. We must create an economics of wealth and well-being that reconnects our communities with their living resources by integrating the practices of cultural and biological evolution. Instead of merely enriching people economically, education and technology must begin creating deep emotional connections between local citizens and their ecosystems. We need to reframe economics as an exchange of essential value between people. We need a kind of distributive value that is based on life and creativity for human development, not the subsistence costs of poverty. Organizing the distribution of resources to meet the needs of everyone will bring new power into the hands of cooperatives, small businesses, and public utilities. The gateway to these regenerative cultures and life-sustaining societies is through cooperative self-governance, giving local and regional communities a meaningful say in the decisions that directly affect their lives. That is the beginning of local economic democracy. Next week, in Principles of Local Economic Democracy, we learn that the first 5 stages of sustainable economies will be aligned only when people become self-sufficient.
Janice, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or questions, thoughts on what we just heard? I was also, yeah, okay, go ahead, Ed.
Wow, the last half of that was really good. I would like to do more. So that was quite a surprise. It would be almost worth it, I think, to repeat that last half for everyone, but that's my feeling.
Yeah, we haven't done that before, but at least you can certainly look at it again when it comes out, when you get the link next week. The link to the recording. Did you have something else to add, Ed? Your hand is still up. I just wondered.
No, just saying.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, if Jacqueline, okay, go ahead.
No, I just would like some discussion on integrating cultural and biological value between people. That's really an intriguing concept. And I don't know that off the top of my head, I can really say anything about it. But if anyone else could speak to that, that would be really great, I think. Integrating cultural and biological value. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can you just expand on that? Integrating cultural and biological, meaning our environment or?
Well, no, I'm quoting, or at least it's what I wrote down from the video that grabbed my attention. Cultural and biological value.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, James. I think you have the answer for that.
Well, first, I'd like to address something about the technology presentation. I think one of the things that really wasn't made clear there is that technology is not just a function of exchange value today. You know, we emphasize the monopolies that are driving the grand level of technology that we're all getting used to. And of course, it's affected our lives greatly. So we can talk about the the downsides of technology a lot, but the fact is that technology has improved our lives immensely. And at the same time, technology is being applied in other areas that are really beneficial, and it can be expanded more in that direction, I think, if we were to create technologies as less of monopolies, but moving toward more of the side of open source software and open source technology in general. I think creating technology more in the public interest than in the private interest is the key. And so to answer Jacqueline's question, that opens the doors to being able to use technology to not only interconnect culture, but also interconnect human beings with nature. And I'll give you an example of that. What we're doing in EDA's research team is looking at carrying capacity deeply, and we're about to we're exploring the possibilities of applying technology to the research that we've been doing. And but that's just the beginning. There are many other areas that can be used to create greater social equity, greater cultural connection, and certainly much more ecological understanding to bring home the opportunities that we have to be able to create greater sustainability. So if technology was the driving force behind sustainability, and if it wasn't driven by companies that were looking to create monopoly network effects, if it was done in the basis of trying to get people to cooperate, to build culture, to use education for purposes of becoming better human beings rather than looking for a job or using education as a stepping stone to a high-paying job, we'd be a lot closer to being able to get to the point of creating a more sustainable society.
Brad, go ahead. Thank you, James.
So maybe a subtext here, and something that kind of I was thinking when I was listening to the original recording, and that might address a little bit of what Janice was saying and asking about. I was thinking about the fact, or apparent fact, that we have kind of gotten to defining economy as like finance, as all related to money. And the root of economy and the root, as most of us here know, and the root of ecology are the same. And economy doesn't really fundamentally, it's only a very narrow view of economy to think that it relates only to money transactions, which was kind of, I guess, my first point earlier. So broadening the concept of economy to include how we relate to each other, how we meet our needs, how we relate to the environment that we depend upon. I think those are really properly part of what economy means. And if we think of it that way, it's perhaps more useful. And that can underlie a shift of, a positive shift. I don't know if I've said that very clear, but.
No, thank you. That's great. Greg, please go ahead.
Yeah, a little bit going into what Brad was just talking about. How can you define economy in the most basic way that you could? I think economics is how we take care of each other or how we don't take care of each other. I think that's kind of what it gets down to. But in terms of technology, I don't know if we're going to get into the concept of productivity. I can't remember if we do in this seminar or not, but I keep thinking about productivity and all the our idea is people want jobs because they want to be productive. They consider jobs productivity. When we create things so people could work and support their families and so forth. But that only works as long as the resources are there and to be able to keep doing that. And so there's almost like a primal or a primary productivity that we don't understand compared to all the secondary productivities that we consider to be productivity, but they're really not the most basic needs of productivity that we need to keep things sustainable. And technology just kind of leverages or is used a lot to leverage these secondary productivities. And that gets into education, I guess, too. Just people just don't understand kind of where the rabbit hole of productivity stops, where it needs to go.
Thanks, Greg. Any other comments? Questions? Roz, please unmute and help and let us know what you think.
Just a little response to what Jacqueline was asking. I don't know if it's what you were really asking, but what came to my mind was just the connection between biology and culture. I think the native peoples of every country have this down to a fine art in that most of their culture and celebration is around nature and around the whole biology of the land and things like that. But I think now the crossover probably is in film and television when you have films like Avatar and Fern Gully, things that are very, they're stories about the connection between humanity and nature rather than actual physical connection between culture and biology somehow. Don't know if that makes sense, but
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jacqueline.
Yeah, I think all of this does ultimately tie into technology as well. And that being, the theme of at least the second half of tonight's PowerPoint. And, I think of culture, I think of the environment, whether it's, we're looking at in biological terms or pleasure terms or whatever it may be, as part of our commons. And James was talking about making technology more accessible, bringing it to people on a broad scale. That to me also speaks to the commons, bringing technology into something of a space where it's accessible to everyone, both in terms of cost and literal accessibility. And so to me, it really is kind of all one. The biological, what was that, integrating cultural and biological value between people. All of that, is done both in our personal lives, I go out and walk in the woods, but also through technology. Protecting our environment, for example, is done through technology and intentionality. So I think, we haven't heard the word commons so far in this series. I suspect it'll pop up here and there. But, that really seems to me to be where all of this meets. And I look forward to continuing that conversation.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Jeff, please go ahead.
Janice, are these comments specifically directed towards the technological part of this presentation or just general?
Just general. You can,
All right.
you can ask anything you like.
Okay. With regard to the education, I made a comment from a belief system I have and things that I have seen over the years, that in one area we have tried to even the playing field. and that is in giving access to education to anybody that has the yearning, the desire, and the support to get it. Having it. And I said, didn't we achieve that? That wasn't a rhetorical question. That was a question I really, wanted to present. And I'm not putting anybody on the spot here, but a comment, I think this was to me. For almost all your rhetorical questions, I would have to answer no. No, my main rhetorical question was, haven't we made a legitimate attempt to even the playing field and give access and inclusion to education? And then that was followed by, I think you are coming from a very privileged and protected standpoint. Well, it could be somebody that's telling me I got spinach between my teeth, which I appreciate very much. So could somebody enlighten me there? Was that towards that? Am I totally off base on that?
Can I jump in here?
Carl, yes, please. Go ahead.
I did not make the comments to Jeff, so I don't know where that came, who made the comments. But bravo to whomever made the comments. And I like Jeff. I do think, Jeff, it does come from a place of privilege. And it's not to say that privilege is wrong, but there's another side of the lens and perspective that's meaningful when you're trying to achieve equity. And so it is probably extremely, I think the right term is, it's very westernized in its viewpoint, even terms like we, right? If we're talking about America, maybe, but also maybe it's applicable for where you live in New York or New Jersey as well, right? I think there have been valid attempts made at achieving equality in education and in order to achieve those means. I don't think all of those, but I've also think there have been undermining activities that have also been made to make sure there were missteps made in those activities. So if you just go to two separate sides of town, right, in a particular city, you may see that the access to resources in the educational system are not the same. That's why separate but equal was not really equal as part of what was done in our society with Topeka Board of Education's decision, right? And so I think that is something that's really meaningful. Segregation did show that there was a separation, and then that separation went from white versus black to public versus private or charter institutions, right? And the interchange in between, right? And it's really about access to resources, right? And so, and it's access to secondary resources, right? But it also turns out that lack of access to primary resources actually becomes a prohibitor from you actually being able to actually fully embrace the access to education as an equalizer in the first place, right? So the idea that food, water, energy, and or shelter, right, as an example, is missing from a person's life could prohibit their ability to actually be fully educated, right? Or even accept the education that's being presented to them, right? And so I do think that if you had if everybody started off on an equal playing field, then what you said makes sense. I don't think, at least in America, we live in a world where everybody's born into an equal playing field. I think opportunity and when access does become available can be an equalizing force, but that's not, everybody doesn't have the ability and capacity to accept that attribute. And so I think valid attempts to be made is not perfect. And I think we're going to continue to work in that past all of our lifetimes, Jeff. But I do think there have been valid attempts that were made. I don't think we should undermine that. I appreciate the HBCUs you talked about earlier. I chose for my undergrad not to go to an HBCU, right? But I chose for one of my graduate degrees to go to an HBCU, right? But I could also see the lack of resources between the two institutions. And so I do think for me, it is something that we've made attempts. I think there's still work to do. And I think that is really the valid question we should begin to ask, is we should appreciate the history and the legacy of what we've seen and that's got us to this place, but we should always continue to ask the question, what more can be done to achieve these means? Because somebody will always look to game the system, right? Because economy still drives what we do, supply, demand, right? The haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor. Those are still going to be overwhelming aspects of how decision-making is driven in our society and our world.
I'm just going to jump to James because I have a feeling he's going to respond to Carl and Jeff's comments. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I would just like to conclude maybe what Carl was saying. If you look, Jeff, if you look up digital divide on the internet, you'll see a definition that says that that the internet has become so expensive that not everybody in the world can afford to use the internet. And so the equality question, I think, that you're bringing up was probably a kind of understanding that we had maybe 20 or 30 years ago when the internet was brand new and it didn't cost very much. But the universal use of the internet is definitely divided along class lines. And unfortunately, that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, James. Okay, Ed, sorry, please go ahead now.
Not a problem. I'd like to thank Carl and Jeffrey both for bringing up things that we're talking about. And I think probably some of the comments that Jeffrey was referring to were mine. And it's, I don't know. I agree that there are less opportunities than sometimes it seems that there are, or perhaps should be. But I'm one of those people who chose to get the hell away from the college system because it didn't serve me. I didn't go to college. I don't have a degree, and I don't care to. But I worked for the last 15 years for a $500 million steel manufacturing company as their cost accounting manager. And basically, my philosophy of working for 54 years straight was just do it. That's what I did. I just did it. So I come from a very poor background. Right now I am working on an old Linux or Lenovo computer that is running Ubuntu Linux software because I hate Microsoft. So this is one of those systems that the rest of the world uses. And people don't even understand that the internet functions on Linux servers because they do not break down. They just keep running. So there's a lot of things that I have different viewpoints on and different understandings. And I notice Eva's not here, and I'm sure she's involved in something more important, but I just want to say that this is a different viewpoint. And again, I really appreciate Carl's viewpoint, and I really appreciate Jeffrey for bringing out what they bring out too. And I'm grateful for this entire discussion, and especially for James and Janice for organizing it. So that's all I need to say, is that I'm actually I want to let Jeffrey know that I'm just one of those people who has a different, disagreeing kind of viewpoint. And It's actually wonderful to be able to say that. Thank you.
Janice, yeah, we can't hear you.
And thank you for your comments, Ed. We like all comments. Different points of view are always stimulating and very welcome. I think we're almost at the top of the hour, and I believe Carl had something to add before we sign off at the end. So I'll pass it over to Carl again.
Thank you for I think this very thoughtful discussion and this thoughtful session on this topic. I think it's been really exciting to have this opportunity to share together here today. Ed said something I really like. He's talked about Linux operating systems running Ubuntu as an operating system, something I've been well familiar with for a long time. But I'm also familiar with Ubuntu as another concept. It's a Bantu term that means humanity. And it comes from an African construct that says, I am because we are. And it's an exciting opportunity to think about what this really means. If we bring it back full circle, is the economy of humanity cannot be really measured transactionally, right? It has to be transformational, and it's based on relationship. And I think the relationships that we have with one another, with our communities, within our organization, help to make this educational content like this continue to be provided, so that we can have a space to share in our goals, to share education content, but really promote a conversation that we should be having. So something that I hope we all take away is that our coexistence and our collaboration and our collegiality necessitates the symbiotic construct that we survive because those around us continue to survive, and we thrive because those around us continue to thrive. So I am because we are. EDA is because each of you have poured your time, resources, sweat, tears into maintaining this. This is our first time going live on Facebook and on YouTube. So I think as an organization, we ought to give ourselves a round of applause for taking a small step towards continuing to advance the organization to ensure the sustainability of EDA long-term, and to make sure we have a legacy for providing that. It just came as a suggestion of an EDA member. Says, ask the question, why aren't we on YouTube? Why aren't we on Facebook? And when that question was asked after last week's seminar, between now and then, we made sure we fixed that. So I want you to know that your opinions matter, your words matter, and the conversation that we're having tonight matters. With that in mind, what I'd really like to encourage everybody to do is to actually continue to support the sustainability of EDA and the conversations that we're having. So this is a great opportunity, whether you're a guest on YouTube, whether you're a guest on Facebook, or you're here on the Zoom channel tonight, to actually continue to promote the content that we're doing that provides advocacy for responsible management of our common resources. You can continue to partner with us. I invite you not only as members, but also as non-members to continue to partner with us and either make a one-time generous gift or to make a recurring gift to the organization. Your ongoing support ensures that we are going to be a growing, dynamic force in our society that achieves the goals and aims which we thrive to go after. I'm excited to work with James, with Janice. I'm gonna go have some conversations with Ed. I look forward to every conversation I get a chance to have with Jeff, Roz, and everyone else that we've had on that spoke tonight. David, thank you for telling me that I look quite attractive with my glasses on today. But I just want to encourage each of you to take an opportunity to partner with us one time. And that may also include, if you don't have the financial resources, to partner with us and your talent and your time as well to support from a volunteer or in-kind component of the work that we do. I'd love to have a conversation with each and every one of you if you're ever interested. Thank you for coming out. And I look forward to seeing you again next week on Wednesday, same bat time, same bad place. Back to Janice, and we'll see you again next week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you very much. This has been a great discussion, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your comments and questions. It's very stimulating. This is one of our more exciting presentations yet. Next week, we will be covering the story of self-sufficiency, organizing citizens to participate in decision-making for the generation, distribution, and protection of their regional commons. So I look forward to seeing you all next week, and look for the link to the recording of this one in the reminder notice that you'll get next week. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Janice. Thank
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Great session. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Good job, everybody.